Hi there, I'm Karen Dunn of KMD Productions. From the equipment manufacturers to the engineers to the business people behind the scenes. Over the years, every member of the Pro Audio corner of the music industry have become family to me, and it's my job to bring the whole eclectic crew together. Each episode, I'll introduce you to one of these characters and open a window into my world of creating community in pro audio. Thanks for tuning in to One and Dunn. Hi, today we're welcoming Rachel Stilwell of Stilwell Law. Rachel is listed as one of the 2022 top music lawyers by Billboard magazine, and she provides legal services for artists, creators, and businesses. So, Rachel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your music story? We've never had a lawyer on the podcast before. So how'd you get started in music and what drew you into the industry? And are you creative yourself? Do you play an instrument or sing or anything?
I am a mediocre singer and started out as a vocal major and realized I was smarter than I was talented. So changed majors. So I've been in the music business all of my adult life, but law is my second career. So I started out working at record labels in radio promotion and marketing. I ran the radio promotion department of the Verve Music Group out of New York. And eventually sales and marketing for them on the East Coast, as well as for their sister classical labels, Deutsche Grammophon, London, and Philips. And then 1999 hit, and the conflation of, or the confluence of Napster and consolidation of radio ownership, consolidation of brick and mortar retail, which was still there so far, and the consolidation of the record labels themselves. And so I got blown out in the merger between Universal and Polygram, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it was a good time to leave the record labels. But also, I got a year severance out of it, and I said, I still had a year left at UCLA, and figured I would finish my undergrad. And I said, I think I'll go to law school. And I thought I was leaving the music business. And I failed miserably at leaving the music business because I got sucked right back in with a different skill set, and everybody thinks that I had a plan, and that I didn't. I thought I was leaving the music business, and but copyright law came easy, and working with artists came easy, and creative people, because I'd done it before in a business context rather than a legal context, and so now I really love what I do. Serving music creators and film and TV and video games and basic copyright and trademark stuff as well outside of the music business, but mainly people know me as a music lawyer. Mm-hmm.
Now, when you went in, did you decide to become a lawyer and you went back to school? Did you choose entertainment law? Is that how do you get into that to start with?
I didn't. So when I went to law school, where I'm now teaching, I'm an adjunct professor at Loyola Law School here, my alma mater, and I'm teaching music law, which I wish that I had taken in law school and didn't. I didn't take copyright law, didn't take trademark law. I just took nothing but courses that would prepare you for the bar exam. But when I got out of law school, I did find a job at a medium-sized firm that happened to have one music partner, Owen Sloan, and a film partner, Leon Gladstone. And while I was brought in to be your standard litigator in business, a business litigator, I hated it. And yet all of the stuff that Owen gave me and all of the stuff that Leon gave me was intuitive. I had to learn some copyright law along the way, and I did. Same with trademark law. But anyway, I just kept asking them, please give me more work so I don't have to litigate, and wound up negotiating and drafting contracts on the entertainment side.
So there really was no career path. You didn't think, this is what I'm going to do now that I'm a lawyer. You just kind of fell into it because of what you enjoyed doing?
Once the opportunity to do a little of that work was presented to me, I glommed onto it and begged for more and never looked back. But at the time that I went to law school, all I knew was that I wanted to use more brain cells than it took to do radio promotion, which was, about relationships and stamina. And, and my time at Verve was, fun. It was great music, Verve in the 90s. So I didn't plan on being a music lawyer. I just planned on being a lawyer. And then I realized there was such a thing as a music lawyer. And, I want to be that now.
It is hard to get, once you are part of this industry, it is hard to leave.
It's true. It's true. And I'm so glad that I didn't. But, had I been one of those people that clung to working at a big record label that just got further consolidated as time goes, and then eventually you're the last man standing, I'm really glad that I invested in a career number two and was able to have a Venn diagram that brought those two, parts of my experience together. I'm lucky.
Now, how do you know that you were kind of forced into that situation? But there are people, like I think about basketball players that are staying a year just too long. They should have retired, done something else. But how do you know? Is it just an internal thing? You listen to yourself that maybe it's time to change careers. Maybe I'm going to do something completely different, because working for a label and going into law, they're two completely different things. I understand why you went into law, but it doesn't seem to be any parallel at all, just when you look at both career paths.
About the same time that the merger happened, I was talking to a gentleman that owned Newbury Comics. I think it was Mike Dreesen, something like that. And he had said 1999, when Napster hit, that their record sales business plummeted immediately by 85%.
Wow.
And it's because everybody was stealing the music instead of buying it. And of course, the subscription streaming model that we have now didn't exist then. And so it looked really cataclysmic. And, and these two giant labels that merged had just gotten rid of 25% of their entire workforce. Wow. And the people that were left, had the jobs of two people instead of one, and were getting paid the same. So I didn't, at the time, I thought, well, this is certainly not a growth industry. But I was so much on the sound recording side of things, being at a record label, that of course that's how it looked, and I didn't think about other sectors of the business, like music publishing and live music and all of that. I just thought, it's been a great ride, but it seemed at the time really evident that it was time for a change. And I'd been, there was a point at which I was at a Chinese restaurant in New York, and I opened up my fortune cookie, and it said, "You would make a good lawyer." And I laughed out loud.
Really?
Because I don't know why I got that particular fortune cookie, but I laughed out loud because I'd always thought about it. I'm like, I like to persuade, and I like to advocate. And I was an advocate as a radio promotion executive and as a marketer, and I'm an advocate now with a different set of skills and language.
So what's your favorite aspect of being an entertainment lawyer?
Solving problems. Sometimes people call their lawyer when there's a deal to be made and negotiated, and you want to get the best financial position coming out of it, and protect your intellectual property, and that's awesome. And I love that because it makes my clients happy. There are other times when people will call their lawyer because they have a problem and they need a solver. And when I get those calls of folks that are in distress, and I can take them out of that stressful situation and solve that problem, it's a gift presented to me to be able to help them out like that. So I guess that's it.
Okay. What's your least favorite part of your job?
Running the firm. So all of the administration, keeping track of my time, bookkeeping, taxes, those are the things that really make me grit my teeth.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that. Entertainment law. Can you explain to someone just kicking off their pro audio career why they should be cognizant of it in a few situations or examples where they might need it?
Sure. Well, the most painfully obvious is when you're presented with paper that they want you to sign. So when that happens, that is a red flag that somebody wants to have you legally obligated to do something or give something. And, under no circumstances should anybody sign a contract without talking to a lawyer. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a big, long conversation, but I wouldn't know how to set up a microphone, and pro audio people would. I can look at a contract in most cases and be able to make sense of it and prioritize and figure out what the most important parts of it are relatively quickly. And so if you're presented with something to sign, or if somebody says, I want to do business with you, and there are about to be deal terms proposed, either by you or by them, then odds are working with a transactional lawyer with negotiation skills, they can usually get you a better deal for yourself than you can, and may be able to recognize leverage points that you can't. So when in doubt, make the call to the lawyer, because they don't start charging you until they say, I am now charging you.
Okay. Did you see any instances firsthand when you were in the label of creatives not being aware of these kind of things? Or were most of them already on top of the whole situation?
Generally speaking, in order to enter a recording contract with a major label, those contracts are dozens of pages long. And so any artist that is coming in will undoubtedly be represented by a lawyer, whether it's a good one or a not so good one, can be another matter, but everybody's pretty much represented. But there are times when creatives would find themselves having done something like make a sample or take a sample and put it in their music, incorporate it into their music, not clear it, deliver it to the label, and either not tell the label that there's a sample in it, and instead represent, without knowing what a representation is, representations, warranties, indemnification, that, all of this stuff is original. I wrote it. All of it's mine. And then you find yourself in a situation later where, oops, there was a sample and it didn't get cleared, and now we've got copyright infringement, and that is no fun. Or you wind up getting it cleared, but you clear it late. And by then, whoever you're clearing it from knows that you're over a barrel because it's in the can, you've already recorded it, you really want to put it out, and so they quadruple the price for clearing it. So, and that still happens, but when I was working at labels, I admired the people in the legal department, and I secretly wished that I could be one of them. Now I'm very happy to be a music lawyer, but I'm glad I'm not working at a label. I like working for myself.
Yeah. How should someone go about getting started with a lawyer, and when? I'm sure there's a lot of thought for emerging creatives who think they can't afford to get a legal advice or assistance. What do you say to that mindset?
There are a few ways to potentially solve those problems. First of all, I would say get referrals of lawyers from people that you know who are in the industry who seem to have their act together. Lawyers work at will, and so they're easy to fire. And so if anybody has a lawyer that they're working with, they haven't fired him yet, it's it's a good sign. But it also, lawyers normally work on retainer, and meaning that they'll get some chunk of money up front and then pay themselves their fees, their hourly attorney's fees out of that retainer that goes into a client trust account until such time as the work is done. And so sometimes it can be difficult to come up with that retainer if you're a developing artist or a developing music professional or audio professional. So there's a couple different ways of looking at that. If you're an artist, then potentially you might be able to get, say, if it's a record deal, the label to pay for your attorney's fees. They want to make sure that that you are represented, because they don't want you claiming later that the contract is unenforceable because it's unconscionable. There are times when it makes sense to just go ahead and invest the money, because the lawyer has a sense and conveys it that they can get you a better deal than you can get yourself. You're going to be better off financially by investing this money that sounds like it's painful to pay right now. There are occasions in which advances are being made where you may be able to work it out so that you get part of your advance earlier. And also you might be able to work out some kind of different fee structure with the attorney, but make the call. Because like I said, we don't start charging until we say, okay, you're on the clock. I'm starting to do real legal work, real analysis, and give you real legal advice. And so now I'm going to charge you X amount of dollars per hour. But if you call a lawyer and just get acquainted and say, I have a deal that I think I need help with, or I have a problem that I need to solve, then the lawyer can say, well, maybe we can work it out on a percentage basis. I'll take a percentage of the proceeds if it looks like a pretty sure deal that everybody's going to stay in this negotiation and walk away. The problem with percentage deals is sometimes people do say, okay, I have to walk away from the deal. The lawyer has spent 10 hours trying to put it together, and 5% of zero is zero. But other times, if it's a type of deal that I've done a million times and the deal points are pretty well squeezed, I will know ahead of time how much, I'll probably know ahead of time how much work it's going to take. And so I might say, okay, flat fee. It's not going to cost you more than this. But every deal, every situation is different. But if you don't call the lawyer and just get their attention, you never know what options there are for trying to make the amount and the structure of the lawyer agreement workable. Did that answer your question?
That did. Yeah, that was good.
All right.
Okay. Over the past few weeks, we've been running a producers poll to gauge where our community is with some common entertainment law situations. So let's dig into these ideas and situations from your perspective. So the first question was, how do producers get referrals to produce new projects? So it was from other artists, from record labels and other. And it was mostly, the responses were mostly from other artists. What do you see on your end?
So sometimes I'm representing the artist and sometimes I'm representing the producer, but I do producer deals often. And most of the time, the producer found that gig by having been referred by another artist. There are sometimes with usually independent labels where they'll get a referral from a label A&R person. But most of the time that it's from other artists. And those producer agreements are, generally speaking, almost always made with the artist, even though there is a recording contract between a third-party record label and the artist lurking in the background that you have to refer to. The contractual relationship is almost always between the producer and the artist rather than the producer and the label. Once in a while, you'll have a situation where the contract is between the producer and the label, but usually with the artist. Yeah.
Okay. The second question was, do you ever contract directly with a record label to produce an artist record? Does contracting with the label instead of the artist affect the artistic product? Does contracting with the record label affect your negotiation process? If so, how? We did get one person who gave an expanded answer, and it's Peter Barker from Penn Station Studios in Santa Monica. And he said, with DistroKid, it makes it easier to collaborate on a direct and by-song basis, producer/mixer with the label, with DistroKid. So what do you think of that? Is that something, what do you see usually if you are contracted directly with a record label? Does it have any influence on your artistic product?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I mean, the reason why I asked it was I was curious about the the perspective of the producers themselves. Since the contracts that I'm doing are almost always presented, either from the artist lawyer or producer's lawyer, and those are the parties to the contract. There have only been a couple of instances where I've had a producer that was contracting with a label, and in those instances, I was representing the artist. So that was purely curiosity on my part.
Yeah. Okay. So your next question was, do you ever read the warranties and indemnification clauses in your written agreements? I'll tell you personally, I hate reading them, but I have been schooled that you need to read everything in every part of your contract. So how important is it to read both those areas in each contract?
First, did anybody answer that question? I didn't think they would, and that's why I asked it. Right? Nobody wants to. That's where that's where the eyes really glaze over, unless you're a lawyer. But they're really important, and nobody wants to hear me go on for 20 minutes about why. But at the end of the day, representations and warranties mean, hey, I'm swearing that I'm gonna do this and everything in this is true, and if it isn't, that it's an automatic breach of contract. And not only that, but the indemnification part is, and if I'm wrong and you get sued because of something that I've breached here, then not only am I going to pay all of my legal costs when I get brought into this stupid case, but I'm going to pay yours too. And so the downside of blowing it on representations, warranties, and indemnification, it's really expensive. It is painful. And so, so if you are warranting that everything in here is original and there's no copyright infringement, and there's a lawsuit involving 6 different people for copyright infringement, you're going to be really unhappy and writing big checks. So anyway, and if you read them and you don't understand them, that's what lawyers are for, and we can walk you through them. Okay.
And I've been told that every time I get a new contract, even if it's something that, like, to say I have a client that's coming back, we're new contract for the new event, that I need to reread everything, which makes me absolutely nuts because it's always the same, but I reread everything. Is that something you think needs to be done?
Yeah, I think, except perhaps in live music situations where you've got an agent or a manager who is reading the contract because it's a little gig for 1 or 2 days or something like that, and that maybe not there, but you want to make sure that you know what you're bound to contractually. And the only way to know that is to read it. And you can either read it yourself, and if you're comfortable with your level of comprehension and understanding, then great. If you want to hire your lawyer to do it, they can do it much faster than you can. You can also, compare documents in Microsoft Word. So if it really is something that is super similar to something that you have signed before, you're doing business with the same parties over and over again, for example, then you can also always do in Microsoft Word a compare docs that'll find the changes for you. And that's a helpful way so that your eyes don't glaze over so much.
Okay. I didn't get to ask this question, but a lot of people are really interested in it. If you use beats that you didn't make yourself, where did you obtain the beats? In the bullet points, where did you get exclusive rights to the beats forever? If you didn't get exclusive rights to the beats forever, then what do you believe you have the rights to do with that beat? If the artist or someone else provided the beat, how did that work? So let's talk about beats, because a lot of people are using them. So what is the legal, how do you deal with this legally?
Make your beats yourself is the best way. Because then you know what you made. You're certain that it's original. And you don't have, licensing headaches. There are times when people will try to license beats from other people and they're not using a lawyer. And they will, there's a term out there that is what I consider a bad term called leasing beats, which implies a short duration of a license when that is not really how copyright works. So if you are using somebody else's beat, you need to get an exclusive license from them so that you don't have the same beat in somebody else's record, which causes all kinds of problems in terms of collecting money, and also inevitably is going to lead to copyright infringement claims because has it been disclosed that somebody else is using the same beat? After the Blurred Lines case with Robin Thicke and Pharrell and the Marvin Gaye estate, nobody's really sure anymore until it gets litigated what's copyright infringement. And that was a situation where it was ostensibly, it was about the musical composition rather than the sound recording, but they brought it to a jury about does it sound like copyright infringement to you? And they said yeah. Because this one sounds just like that one, but what sounded the same were the underlying rhythmic elements, right? And which aren't even part of what would go in sheet music in a musical composition. Right. And so so with bad cases out there, having to do with copyright infringement, you got to be really careful about, if you get a beat, you need to know that hopefully it's original and you did it. But if not, then you have exclusive rights to it. And you can negotiate points with whoever gave you the beat. And, in terms of, if you can't afford the beat and you just have to use it, then, you can come to me and we can figure out how to get it for you anyway, and legally, and without being in danger of winding up sued for infringement later. Right.
So if someone does come up with a beat, do you when you're using it, do you grant it exclusively, if you're working with an artist, to them? Do you to the company in writing? How do you?
You would generally license it to the artist, who then would say that the whole sound recording is generally speaking, whether this is good or not, and reasonable minds can differ, the artist is generally going to call that whole sound recording a work made for hire with their major record label. Or if they hold on to their masters, then they would own the copyright in the sound recording, and then just license it to a label or get their own distribution or whatever their deal is. But in any case, they need to own the beat, essentially. And there are things that you can give up in exchange for that ownership. But you need an exclusive license so nobody else is using it. And in copyright, if you have an exclusive license and it's in perpetuity, it's the same as a sale. So, so you might be able to give revenue streams and financial rewards to the person whose beat you got. You could also decide amongst yourselves not, I'm not advocating for a particular position here, but you could say, all right, if I can't give you what you want up front for this beat, then I will give you back-end compensation. Or if I can't give you what you want up front for this beat, then we can talk about ownership splits, because I might give you a little piece of ownership if I own the master. Once you have a sound recording that is owned by more than one entity, it's encumbered and it's harder to sell it down the line potentially. And so you don't want to give up, nobody wants to give up copyright ownership of anything. Anyway, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. But what you don't want to do is have a non-exclusive beat and then wind up with 3 different songs out there all using the same stuff, accusing each other of copyright infringement. Then you're really spending money on lawyers.
Yeah. Okay, when you're negotiating a contract, what's the most important part to focus on? Is it upfront fee points? Where do you want to?
Are we talking producer agreements?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just with any agreement, there's usually 2 questions, and the first question is, show me the money. What kind of compensation are they going to get, upfront or back end or both? And then the other that is usually not as much on the mind of the creative person that's coming to the lawyer is, and how do I protect my intellectual property? How do I protect my rights? How can I not give everything away, IP-wise?
Right.
So for producer agreements, it's the point of producer agreements from the recording artist perspective is you want to make sure that you have work made for hire language in there. So the default under copyright law is that whoever produces a copyrightable work is the one that owns it. In this case, however, potentially you've got an artist who has commissioned a copyrightable work, and they've commissioned the producer to create it for them. And so they want to make sure that the producer signs something that says that this is a work made for hire. And the producer, on the other hand, is saying, okay, well, I want to be paid, and I want to be paid handsomely, hopefully. So I need an upfront fee, and all or some of that fee may be a recoupable advance against future royalties, which leads us to royalties and back-end compensation and points. So, so you want to negotiate for both front-end and back-end compensation. If my clients are on the fence about where to put more time and energy, I generally say on the points end, because when records blow up, they can make a lot of money. And then there's credit. So you want to make sure that you have a contractual provision that obligates the artist and their heirs and successors to make sure that you really are getting credit where you're supposed to. Every Grammy season, there's always somebody that says, "Hey, I worked on that record, but I didn't get credit." Right. And when it's that late in the life of a record is not when it's easiest to fix. So you want there to be a provision in the producer agreement that spells out exactly what kind of credit that you're going to get, and what happens if there's somebody else that works on the record after you. So there have been times. So I work with one of my clients is a vocal producer that has worked on all sound recordings of a big pop star, which includes getting the best vocal that they can get, but also includes some tuning. No artist wants anybody to know that their vocals have been tuned. Right. So does he get credit for what he was really doing? No. So okay, well, if I'm not going to get credit and I can't go around telling people that this is this is in my bag of tricks here and skill wise,
Right.
then you better pay me more. Because I can't use the currency of credit. So those are, there are certainly other aspects to a producer agreement. What are the producer's obligations in order to help the artist get deliverables ready, to bring to a record label where the artist is disorganized and yet they're contractually obligated to deliver a bunch of stuff to the record company. One thing though I will say about producer agreements is that what gets accidentally left off sometimes when either there's a new lawyer involved or one that isn't really seasoned in the music business, sometimes there will be a letter of direction that is supposed to be sent to a record label or record labels or a sound exchange. And so my advice would be to anybody that's working on a producer agreement to verify and get a copy and put in your file in a place where you know where it is, all letters of direction that are supposed to be with the contract. Because if it's 10 years down the line and you're not getting your royalties and you're like, why not? You're going to have a burden to prove that this royalty stream is supposed to be coming to you. Right. And your lawyer may or may not be alive. Or, the record company may not be able to find it, and so, right. Anyway, so while we talked about sort of the major deal points of a producer agreement, I have seen so many times where there's a producer that finds themselves later not having a copy of the letter of direction that would prove their entitlement to a stream of royalties. And so that's the last question to ask your lawyer at the end of the deal-making process on your producer agreement. Where is the LOD? And I need a copy.
It's a good thing to know, yeah. I know you work a lot with manufacturers in pro audio also. What kind of legal things do you do with the manufacturer side?
For manufacturers, it's pretty much trademark work. So, everybody's got a brand and so it's advising them on, they're using a particular mark to identify the source of goods, services, and so helping them with trademark registration applications, both here in the United States and abroad. Gear people also tend to need patent lawyers, and I am not a patent lawyer. I do a lot of copyright and trademark work, but for patent, you need a special license, and so I've got patent lawyers that I refer out for that kind of thing. Okay.
So you were at my golf tournament in October.
Yes.
And
for better or for worse.
No, it was a good time, but I think you probably could figure out how much this community means to me. And part of the reason I'm doing the podcast is because I want everybody to know how great this pro audio community is. So a question that I ask all the people on the podcast is, what does community mean to you?
Community means, for instance, showing up at a golf tournament where you don't golf and golfing anyway, and having the people on your foursome say, so it was me and Denise Donatelli with Nate Kunkel and Carmen Grillo. And I said to the guys, I don't golf, but I'm doing it anyway because it sounded like it would be fun. And Nate said, you got to either be cool or you have to be able to golf. And I said, I'll be cool, no problem, because I can't golf. And it was horrible, but we had so much fun. And, so I love the pro audio community, and it's nice that, I've always had clients that were in the pro audio community, but I felt like an outsider. And then your golf tournament was the point at which I said, I really want in. These people are really nice and they really care about each other. And I had been really shy because I felt like an outsider and I don't know anything about gear and technical stuff, and I don't speak the language. But I felt welcomed anyway because they're like, hey, you've got a skill set we value. So, and you're cool. So, so come on in. Anyway, I everybody's so likable and so earnest. So I feel very welcomed and I feel very lucky and blessed because of that.
Yeah. And it was a good term. You came to a good one because we hadn't had it for a couple of years. So everybody turned out. So it was a really
lots
good
of
one.
waterworks.
Yes.
Lots of tears at the end.
So outside of your practice, you're heavily involved in music advocacy through the Recording Academy. What's your favorite aspect of giving back in this way? And what are some policy wins in your eyes in the past few years?
Wow. Well, with music advocacy, we're just all trying to make the world a better place for music creators, creative people, copyright owners, and everybody wants to get paid fairly for the use of their work. And traditionally, that has been an uphill climb in the music community, and so the changes that get made get changed over time. They don't happen, quickly. And the relationships that get made with federal lawmakers and regulators happen over time. So my volunteer stuff with the Recording Academy has generally been recruiting, training, coaching, and making comfortable Recording Academy members as they prepare to meet with lawmakers to ask for copyright reform. And it's fun. At first, it can seem intimidating to music people to say, I want to go ask a lawmaker to change the law. And yet, lawmakers, they're elected. They want to hear from constituents. They certainly want to hear from music people because they think we're much more interesting than they are, and they're not wrong. I was able to recruit and coach Dee Snider or Eddie Money or Booker T. Jones to, get ready to either have meetings with lawmakers or testify. And they all do, a great job. A few years ago, we got the Music Modernization Act passed. And so that was some long overdue reform with regard to streaming mechanical royalties, royalties for musical compositions. And part of that was the AMP Act, which codified and simplified how producers, engineers, mixers can get their royalties paid if they've negotiated deals for getting that money, and shored up some problems associated with collecting those royalties on pre-1995 works where it was hard sometimes to say, hey, I'm owed these royalties, but hey, I can't find my letter of direction. Can you take my word for it? And anyway, so it was helpful there. I think there was a point at which we got a law passed that created a new FAA regulation that requires the airlines to let you bring your musical instruments on board and stow them on the aircraft rather than in, the cargo bin if there's room. So, so if you're a saxophone player or a guitar player and, and you've got priority boarding, then if there's space in that first class, coat bin, then you can put your instrument in there if it'll fit above the the seats, that's fine. If you want to buy a seat for your cello, you can do that. But until that happened, that's just one instance of a music advocacy win. But before that happened, there were a lot of people, trying to transport really, really expensive, old musical instruments that would just get told by flight attendants, no, you got to check it, and the rules have changed. That's just an example.
Yeah. Do you think that's important for all creatives to get involved somehow in advocacy? Because I can't imagine that's going to be top of their mind, a new producer or an artist thinking, oh, I need to jump on this and have a voice.
It's a great networking tool. I mean, I have made so many friends, and I've picked up quite a few clients along the way. I've given away my time, and I've paid for my own travel. A lot of people think that if you're a lawyer and you're doing advocacy, you must be a lobbyist and getting paid handsomely. And I volunteer, and I've been to Grammys on the Hill 11 times. And for each of those times, I paid my own travel costs, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Not everybody can afford to do that. So if you are a Recording Academy member, usually in October of every year, they have a local version where you can meet with your lawmakers right there in your own hometown.
Oh, nice.
But it's a great way to meet people. This last October, I flew to New Mexico to lead the Recording Academy's district advocate meetings there, because we needed to develop relationships with lawmakers there that until recently hadn't heard from us. Well, so we had a meeting with the chief aides to Senator Ben Ray Lujan. And by the end of that meeting, everybody already knew that they were going to be recording together. So we had the meeting at the Kitchen Sink studio in Santa Fe. And a lot of these people had heard of each other, but hadn't had an opportunity to get in the same room. And I know that they've all been doing deals and working on each other's records since. And they wouldn't, and that was great. The excuse for them to get together.
Yeah, that's great. What one piece of advice would you give someone who's just starting their career in the music industry, whether it's in entertainment law or as a creative?
Pour your heart into your art and your music. If the business side isn't your strong suit, that's okay, but find somebody to help you whose strong suit is business. And as applicable, law. So some creatives are really good business people, and still from time to time need to talk to a lawyer, but can handle their own business affairs well. And others are not so great at the business and should be left to pursue their creative endeavors anyway, and be able to focus their energy on that instead of trying to figure out how to get, what kind of form to sign or whatever. So I would just say surround yourself by the best business people that you can find, and put your effort and passion and elbow grease into making the best art that you can make and that you love.
I love that. That's great advice. So I talk a lot about work-life balance, and you work a lot. And so how do you balance that? What do you do when you're not working?
I should be taking more vacations and having more fun, honestly. But I do have a 14-year-old daughter, 13-and-a-half-year-old daughter who's, only going to be in the house for a few more years. And so I'm just spending all of the time that I can doing, mom stuff. So it's Girl Scout cookie season, and we're busy with that. But we really love it. And she really loves music. And so, we listen to a lot of music together. I missed live music during the pandemic a lot. And so, so I've been trying to get out a little bit more. I just the other day went to the Grammy Beach Boys tribute. And so getting out to see live music, trying to exercise and, do some Pilates and some, to try to stay healthy and, reading, gardening. I love gardening.
Are you taking golf lessons?
Not yet. And, I was thinking about that as we were starting. I so want to take golf lessons. So I have a big project that I'm working on right now for the Music First Coalition. It's my only industry. It's not my only sort of institutional client. And that's going to take me a couple months. And then when that project is wrapped up, then I think the first thing I'm going to do is sign up for golf lessons so that I can show up next year and not embarrass myself quite as much.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
And I ask everybody as the last question. I'm going to visit you in LA and we're going to get dinner together. So where are we going? What are we eating? What are we drinking? What kind of music are we listening to? And what are we talking about?
Wow. There is a little place called Sushi Spot in Tarzana that is my favorite sushi restaurant. And it is in a strip mall with a 7-Eleven and I think a barber or something. So it's in a tiny little parking lot. So it's really unassuming, but it has the best food, the best sushi. And so we would go there. And I think we would be sitting at the sushi bar, probably having some Chardonnay and maybe at the end having a little hot green tea. And we would probably be talking about music and family. And travel. So I didn't get to travel much over the pandemic. I did get to go to Grammys on the Hill last year, but anyway, I'm overdue for some trips. I'm a little restless. So
where?
Probably
Where?
I'd really like to go to like Fiji or Bali or somewhere exotic like that. I have not been to Spain, and I'd really like to go. Japan sounds interesting. But for right now, I would settle for a national park somewhere. Just get me out of the house.
Okay, well, hopefully that will happen soon.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Good. So thank you so much for being part of this. It's been fun to talk with you and having my podcast. And hopefully I'll see you at some events coming up this year.
That's great. I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure. And I appreciate the invitation. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.